So I think those are the big changes which India is right now blessed with. The rest is up to us as voters and up to our politicians and our leaders and up to our sort of business leaders to make the best use of it.
So clearly, if, so many things we are blessed with, and there are many things that we have to take in our hands and get them done, so to say. One of those things would be education. And Shantanu, if we have to really take advantage of our demographic dividend, we have to make sure we educate people, and not just educate people, but train people as well. Because if we don't make them employable, then there is no point in adding 12 million people every year to the working age group. So what do you think? Are we as a nation doing enough for education, or are we not?
Thanks, Chanda. And it's, I think, quite apparent to all of us that India of the future that we're talking about, our biggest opportunity on the global stage is to transform ourselves into a knowledge economy. And that is not possible unless we build the human capital that we are talking about. And education is really the factory that produces the human capital. So it's clear as a writing on the wall that unless we fix education in India, we will not reach the dream that we are really thinking about. So on one hand, if you really sort of kind of draw a table, on the left-hand side you have these 600 million young people under the age of 29. And that sparks off these amazing thoughts about what a great opportunity we have to build the global workforce. But on the other hand, you have an education system that is in shambles. And I have gone so far as to say that this is a national emergency that nobody really knows about, because we have 140 million kids who don't go to school. We have a shortage of 200,000 schools. Only 10% of the workforce has any opportunity to get trained in any kind of vocational skill. So a back of the envelope calculation shows that not only do you need massive amounts of capital, upwards, I would say, of 100,000 crores. And this is not even a number that people are talking about. And that is really the sense of desperation, because if you don't talk about it, how are you even going to think about solving this problem? And on the other hand, you need time. And I think both of these things, given the state of where India is in, the sweet spot that we are talking about, are in short supply. We have neither the time nor the capital. So we have to really think about taking some revolutionary steps so that your demographic dividend doesn't really become a demographic liability. And to respond to Shekhar, if politics is what is driving it, if you imagine there's hundreds of millions of young people who don't have the same vision of India of the future, who are not educated, who don't have jobs, isn't that a scary scenario that we are really talking about? And I think politics has a huge role to play as well. Because if this revolutionary change is going to be brought about, it is really the politician who can make the difference.
No, the point is, actually, I would raise the question to both of you. One is, if there is a sweet spot, and if the voter is really asking, what about the education of my child, then it should translate into much more in terms of education. The second is, Shantanu, to you, that is it only for the government to say education is our responsibility, or do we have to think much more out of the box, more public-private partnerships, more innovative solutions of making education accessible, affordable, and so on?
So two very quick points, Chanda. Firstly, I think the consumer is not willing to wait for the change to happen, for government to fix the problem. And every day you see consumers voting with their wallet. There are large parts of India where enrollment in government schools is dropping, and enrollment in English medium private schools, no matter of what quality, is increasing. India is the only country in the world where you spend more money on educating your kids than you spend on mortgage, than clearly you spend on food. So the customer is giving a very strong signal saying, I need good education because I believe education is the future. And it is not for the government. So private enterprise is going to come up whether you like it or not. 95% of incremental education capacity in the country in the past 10 years has been created by the private sector. Government is investing only 0.5% of GDP, 0.5% in higher education. Our gross enrollment ratio is the lowest in the ASEAN region. So if the government doesn't fix the problem, there will be models that are based on consumer funding that will emerge, provided you unshackle the private sector. The last standing vestige of regulation in India is the education economy, where today the government says you cannot run a school or a college for profit. So you're shutting off the entire tap of private capital. How are you going to solve this problem?
Shekhar?
I think politicians are trying to answer this, but our system of delivery is broken. Education, as you know, is essentially a state subject, particularly sort of school and college education. And you will find wide variations in terms of the quality of state governments. So some state governments are obviously doing better than others. I entirely agree that the private sector has a great role and will keep on adding to this. But really, in a country with such wide disparities, even while you reform the laws and reform regulation, and I would agree with Shantanu, you should allow regulated profit. You should have strong regulation, but allow profit to come into the running of educational institutions. But at the same time, state has to spend more, and the state has to spend a lot more sensibly. Some of the things the state has done have paid dividends, even something like, say, midday meal scheme. But there are lots of wastages, and you're not getting enough bang for the buck. I mean, it's an inappropriate expression, but I'm using it because it's effective. So I think many models are right now being debated, and many chief ministers are checking out many models. But not everything is working, and nobody has as yet discovered a perfect one. I mean, in Bihar, we've seen the example of Nitish Kumar giving free bicycles to kids going from class, now to boys as well, going from class 8 to 9 to prevent dropouts. But the fact remains that even after they pass class 10, what will happen? Will they still be looking for jobs as security guards in our cities?
Yeah, I think that the task is so huge that everybody has to do everything in that sense. So we have to have the government machinery moving, we have to have the private sector moving, and we also have to have the public-private partnership. In some of our own cases, we have seen that the infrastructure of the government schools is very good, but what they need from the private sector is some amount of training the teachers, making sure systems are in place, monitoring is in place, and the quality of education improves substantially. So I think those are also models that we need to keep trying. But Neelam, coming to you, the last decade in that sense saw a huge contribution to the economy on the basis of technology and technology-based services. How do you see the role of technology for India in the next decade, both in terms of driving growth and also maybe in terms of finding some innovative solutions to some of the challenges that we are discussing?
So Chanda, as I look at the year ahead and maybe a decade ahead, I think this is the year where IT will be used to transform the country. And transform is a very strong word, but when you look at it, whether we look at rural India and we talk about social inclusion, financial inclusion, truly it's not going to be possible without IT. Shantanu may like to go to every village and have a school, but to make that happen, the kind of investment it needs, no project can be viable. But if we were to think of doing it with the use of IT, with the use of the networks this country has, I'm sure we can achieve it in a far more affordable way. So when we talk about transforming India, it also, I think, means bringing a larger population into workforce and having a population which is employable. And that's where this whole IT will play a big role. The second side of transformation which we are going to see is going to be in the larger cities, in the metropolitans, and in the consumer retail which we are seeing. And gone are the days when Indians had patience. So let me just put it this way. We have been aspirational as a nation. We always aspired for something better, financially, socially, but we are at a level that we've run out of patience. And that is also seen in the younger generation. They have no patience. They are the generation who's exposed to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. They come into an office, they expect, okay, boom, my network will work, my application will work. So when you are in a metro town, you are going to see younger generation demanding much more from the IT infrastructure you put in. What it will do is unite the country into looking at IT and the employability it creates far more than anything else. I think we will see a boom of rural BPOs as we go ahead and deploy IT. We will see the school system, education system transform with the use of IT. And the shortage of teachers we talk about from one village to the other is something which we can take over. Medicine is another thing which is getting touched with IT in a big way. So when I look at the next decade, it is going to bring about a transformation in this country.
So Janmejay, if the next decade is going to bring about transformation in the country, you look at the Indian corporate sector, across different segments, different industries. You look at the corporate sector globally. How do you think the Indian corporate sector, both on the large size and on the SME size, are they ready to participate in this kind of growth, or is there certain building blocks that they need to build themselves to be able to take part in this growth?
So, Chanda, I'll answer that in two separate ways. One in terms of, I liked the term that both Shekhar and Neelam used, aspiration. I think the rapidly developing economies, the emerging economies, can be well defined by that word, aspiration. Whether it's the consumer, whether it's the business, whether it's the government, they all have strong aspirations. They have an aspiration where they believe the next generation, the next 10 years will be better rather than worse. And so Indian business also has this very interesting mix of self-confidence and humility. It doesn't have a raw arrogance. It has a self-confidence and it has a humility. It has a humility because of a past which was volatile. If you really look at it, whichever way you define it, I would say Nehru created a lot of the infrastructure, and then during Indira Gandhi's time we had a socialist transformation, and then we just couldn't pay for it. And so we had a whole period